Right now on Morning News Now, a forced handshake and a fiery face-off between Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump. The two candidates going head-to-head on policy, politics, and getting personal in the first presidential debate.
Donald Trump actually has no plan for you because he is more interested in defending himself than he is in looking out for you.
It's just a soundbite. They gave her that to say.
She's going to do this, she's going to do that, she's going to do all these wonderful things. Why hasn't she done it? She's been there for 3.5 years.
We have team coverage with highlights and analysis on what could be a turning point in the election.
And developing this morning, we are tracking Hurricane Francine now barreling toward the south as millions of people across Louisiana and Texas brace for heavy rain, dangerous winds, and flash flooding.
One thing that we've learned is that the predicted pathway of a storm like this doesn't always turn out to be true. The most important thing that we are focused on is protecting the life of every Texan.
We don't want to downplay this event, but we also do not want people to panic.
A lot to get to this morning. Thanks for joining us. I'm Joe Fryer.
And I'm Savannah Sellers.
This morning, both Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump are claiming victory after the first and possibly only presidential debate between the two.
Yeah, and what was also the first in-person meeting ever for the candidates in Philadelphia last night. They sparred over the economy, immigration, and reproductive rights. During the 90-minute debate that was riddled with personal attacks, both tried to convince voters they have a better plan for the country. Here's a look at some of the highlights.
Kamala Harris, let's have a good debate.
Nice to see you. Have fun.
Thank you.
Donald Trump has no plan for you. And when you look at his economic plan, it's all about tax breaks for the richest people. I am offering what I describe as an opportunity economy, and the best economists in our country, if not the world, have reviewed our relative plans for the future of America. What Goldman Sachs has said is that Donald Trump's plan would make the economy worse. Mine would strengthen the economy.
She has no policy. Everything that she believed 3 years ago and 4 years ago is out the window. She's going to my philosophy now. In fact, I was going to send her a MAGA hat. She's gone to my philosophy. But if she ever got elected, she'd change it. And it will be the end of our country. She's a Marxist. Everybody knows she's a Marxist.
Donald Trump was fired by 81 million people. So let's be clear about that. And clearly he is having a very difficult time processing that. And I pledge to you, when Congress passes a bill to put back in place the protections of Roe v. Wade, as President of the United States, I will proudly sign it into law. But understand, if Donald Trump were to be reelected, he will sign a national abortion ban.
The baby will be born, and we will decide what to do with the baby. In other words, we'll execute the baby, because they're radical. The Democrats are radical in that.
There is no state in this country where it is legal to kill a baby after it's born.
They've destroyed the fabric of our country. Millions of people let in, and all over the world, crime is down all over the world except here. Crime here is up and through the roof, despite their fraudulent statements that they made.
As you know, the FBI says overall violent crime is actually coming down in this country. But Vice
Excuse me,
President
the
Harris,
FBI they were defrauding statements. They didn't include the worst cities. They didn't include the cities with the worst crime. It was a fraud.
I think this is so rich. Coming from someone who has been prosecuted for national security crimes, economic crimes, election interference, has been found liable for sexual assault, and his next big court appearance is in November at his own criminal sentencing.
We have full team coverage of last night's debate and the fallout. In just a few minutes, we'll get analysis from NBC News senior national politics reporter John Allen. But we're going to get started with NBC's Monica Alba, who covers the White House, as well as Vice President Harris, and NBC News correspondent Dasha Burns, who has been tracking the Trump campaign, of course. Good morning to both of you. Monica, I'll get started with you. Ahead of last night's debate, there was a sense, I think, in some of the polling, as well as just in what we were hearing, our NBC News colleagues from voters, that they didn't feel like they knew the vice president very well, didn't feel like they had a lot of clarity on her policies. Did last night's debate change that? And what are you hearing from the Harris campaign?
Well, her advisors and her campaign, they're all feeling pretty good this morning, Savannah and Joe, about how that went. They felt like the answers that she practiced in her mock debate sessions about trying to distinguish herself from both Joe Biden and Donald Trump landed pretty decently. They feel like she was able to get in some of these policies and proposals without going on too long and getting into the weeds. There were certainly some questions that she sidestepped and did not get into much detail on, but they also feel like there was a particular answer in the evening where she summed up, in their view, Donald Trump's entire record in office in less than 1 minute, when she kept saying, what Donald Trump left us was this. He left us with this kind of an economy, she said. He left us with this kind of a post-pandemic recovery. He left us with all of these issues. And so they feel like rhetorically she was able to do this. And they feel like one of the most key effective strategies that they also had discussed going into this, she was able to use pretty well, which was this idea of baiting the former president to engage on certain topics that they say made him look defensive, on things like Project 2025, on things like the fact that she said there are people who leave his rallies early, other major issues about where he went to school and about his supporters, things that then he spent time responding on instead of then enumerating his own positions. So overall, the Harris team says they feel like this was a, quote, decisive victory. They do feel like there was a balance, they say, in the vice president talking about her own view of the future while defending what she's done in the past, too.
Dasha, let's touch on a moment that raised a lot of eyebrows, getting a lot of attention online. The former president repeated the false claim, which his campaign has promoted, that Haitian immigrants in Springfield, Ohio, are eating people's pets. Let's play a bite and talk about it on the other side.
In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in. They're eating the cats. They're eating the pets of the people that live there.
I just want to clarify here. You bring up Springfield, Ohio, and ABC News did reach out to the city manager there. He told us there have been no credible reports of specific claims of pets being harmed, injured, or abused by individuals within the immigrant community.
Well, I've seen people on television.
Let me just say here, this is
the people on television say my dog was taken and used for food. So maybe he said that, and maybe that's a good thing to say for a city manager.
I'm not taking this from television.
But the people on television saying their dog was eaten by the people that went there.
Again, the Springfield city manager says there's no evidence of that. Vice President Harris, I'll let you.
All right, so Dasha, walk us through what this is about, what the facts tell us, and what is Trump's team saying this morning?
Yeah, Joe, I got a lot of DMs about this last night, people wondering what was going on there. Look, this all started from some social media rumors that were then amplified by conservative influencers on X and other spaces, and then again amplified by the Trump campaign. This is something there's no evidence of as of now. The mayor of Springfield says they have no documented cases of this, and he says that it's actually distracting from the real issues like housing concerns, resources needed for schools, and an overwhelmed health care system. And this is one of those moments that, to Monica's point, Republican operatives are telling me they're frustrated by Trump sort of taking the bait and then getting off topic. Immigration is a topic that should be a strong one for him. Polling shows that voters trust him more on this issue than Harris, but taking it sideways that way was not what his allies were hoping for.
Monica, it seemed like the vice president sort of rattled Trump on several occasions, appearing to get under his skin. We had actually heard that was some advice that the vice president had received in terms of how to approach this. This morning, the Harris team is calling for another debate. What can you tell us about what they're trying for here?
Yeah, and that advice specifically, at least from one person who has faced Donald Trump on the debate stage one-on-one, is former Secretary of State and Democratic nominee from 2016, Hillary Clinton. We know that she spoke with Vice President Harris. They've been in touch over the last 7 weeks. And that was one of the things that she advised her on, this idea of he may try to bait you, but you should try to bait him first. So it seems like they did employ that. And then in terms of another debate, almost immediately after the event wrapped up last night, the Harris campaign said, great, let's do it again in October, obviously indicating they felt pretty pleased with her performance. Now, this was something that the vice president herself had said she was open to if Donald Trump showed up last night, and then they said we would have conversations about a potential future debate. Now, we know that the former president is not necessarily committing to another contest, so it's unclear whether there will be another debate, but given how the Harris team responded last night, that's a really good indication of where they feel they are in terms of the upper hand, they would argue, in terms of having another debate, because they feel like it went well enough that they could have another matchup. But I think their sense there is that they're almost saying that in such a way that's so forceful that they don't think Donald Trump will necessarily commit to it. So again, it's another example of them perhaps trying to bait him into doing so because they feel that that might work for them.
Dasha, another indication. After the debate, the former president made an appearance in the spin room where we normally hear from campaign surrogates. Most observers will say if a candidate is showing up in that spin room, they probably don't think they won. How's the Trump campaign feeling about his performance last night?
Yeah, the traditional idea in politics is that winners don't spin, right? But he came into the spin room. He said it was the greatest debate ever. He cited some poll numbers that we can fact check that weren't accurate. And he was frustrated by the moderators of the debate. And when asked both in the spin room and then this morning again, he was on Fox News about another debate with Harris, he was non-committal. He says, I don't know if we need another debate because we had such a great night last night. So will a second debate happen? That's a big question mark, despite his campaign for weeks saying that they have committed to another debate. And overall, his allies have been out in full force on all the media platforms, basically criticizing the moderators. Another indication that perhaps it didn't go how they were hoping it would for various reasons, guys.
All right, Dasha Burns and Monica Alba, thank you both very much.
For more on the debate, we're joined now by NBC News senior national politics reporter Jonathan Allen. John, good to have you with us. This was a much different debate from what we saw in June between former President Trump and President Biden. In a new piece for NBCNews.com, you wrote that Vice President Harris is a, quote, much tougher rival now, and that Mr. Trump, quote, missed an opportunity to lock in his good personal vibes after recent favorable polling. What are your key takeaways from last night?
Yeah, I mean, Kamala Harris went out and made cogent arguments on her behalf. She had coherent rebuttals. She was a much different candidate than Joe Biden in the June debate. So number one, you watch Trump struggle with that. You watched him for the first time actually face an adversary who had some deftness and agility on stage. I think he was rattled. At times, not always, but at times. And he was distracted from getting his message across. You heard Dasha talking about this, she said rumors. There's been sort of started on social media, the idea that immigrants in Springfield, Ohio are eating pets. There's no there's no evidence for that. And Trump was sort of out there. So the main takeaway here is, you had a race where Donald Trump was, was in a worse place than he had been against Kamala Harris versus where he'd been against Joe Biden, and that did not change last night.
Well, let's talk more about the former president and his strategy in the debate. We know Mr. Trump referenced President Biden often, saying his name many times over the 90 minutes in trying to prevent Vice President Harris from separating herself from the Biden administration. At one point, Harris said, "You're not running against Joe Biden, you're running against me." Maybe a strong point to make, right? I mean, on the former president's part. I mean, she has been the vice president for 3 years, talking about what she will do ahead. How did he do in trying to make that point?
It is a strong point, and I thought that broke through, right? He said, you've had 3.5 years to make these changes. You haven't done it. Why haven't you done it? Harris is absolutely running on Joe Biden's record and Joe Biden's agenda to the extent that she has changed policy positions from his agenda or his record. It's been to essentially, basically add a little bit to what Biden's called for. So, Trump was, I think, very much able to break through on that. She is making the rhetorical argument that she is a new generation of leader. You heard her say that last night. So that makes her distinct from both Trump and from Biden, as she said. But this is something she's got to figure out over the course of the next 55 days. Can she basically run on Joe Biden's record, Joe Biden's agenda as a fresher candidate, and have people believe that they will get something different, because most Americans think that the country's on the wrong track.
And John, when we talk about Vice President Harris, a recent New York Times Siena College poll showed a majority of young voters feel they need to learn more about her, as well as more than 40% of both Hispanic and black voters. We know Harris got under Trump's skin throughout the debate, including making references to crowd sizes. That was clearly the goal. Her team is pleased with that. Did she miss a chance to define herself more last night?
I think she did, Joe. That doesn't mean she didn't define herself at all. It doesn't mean that she won't have won over some of those voters who wanted to hear more. But I do think that, her main goal, it appeared last night, was to get under Donald Trump's skin, and that worked. But also, the American public's very familiar with Donald Trump. What they're still waiting to hear more of is, what is it that Kamala Harris will do? And not only what is it what she will do, but how will she get it done? Because she would face in any circumstance a difficult Congress. She would face in any circumstance a Supreme Court that is, that has values that are very different than a Democratic president's agenda. So, what's she going to be able to get done? And so I think there's probably some more work to be done on that end of things.
All right, John, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
In the aftermath of last night's debate, the Harris camp picked up a major endorsement.
Singer Taylor Swift announced she was endorsing the vice president just moments after the debate wrapped up. In an Instagram post to her more than 283 million followers, Swift said Harris fights for the rights and causes she believes in, and called Harris a steady-handed, gifted leader. She also criticized the fake AI images shared by the former president that falsely claimed that she endorsed the Trump-Vance ticket.
The Grammy-winning artist went on to sign her post, quote, "childless cat lady," a reference to language used by Trump's running mate J.D. Vance to describe women who do not have children.
Everyone's sort of been waiting to see who she would endorse. We know that she did make an endorsement 4 years ago. She didn't make one 8 years ago and has talked about regretting that.
Absolutely.
Now we have this endorsement. The big thing will be, does it make a difference when it comes to young voters?
That is right.
All right, let's turn now to Hurricane Francine. It's currently taking aim at the Gulf Coast this morning. In Louisiana, mandatory evacuations are in place along the shore for the Category 1 storm that's only expected to get stronger before it makes landfall sometime this afternoon.
Parts of southern Texas are already dealing with rising tides ahead of what forecasters expect to be life-threatening storm surge along the coast. Officials warn those dangerous storm surges could hit areas from western Louisiana into the east along the Mississippi and Alabama border. Many people have been stocking up on supplies to help them get through the storm that's already packing sustained winds of up to 90 miles an hour. This morning, nearly the entire Louisiana coastline is under a hurricane warning as President Biden declared a state of emergency overnight to help the areas most likely to be affected.
NBC News correspondent Kathy Park is live for us in Baton Rouge. So, Kathy, on its current path, Francine expected to drop up to 12 inches of rain across several states along the coast. What are the conditions you're seeing so far?
Hey, Joe, Savannah, good morning to both of you. So right now we are slowly starting to feel the outer bands of Hurricane Francine. So the winds are starting to kick up, but things will deteriorate quickly over the next several hours. Landfall expected sometime mid-afternoon or early evening. But we are watching several issues potentially later on today, which could include flooding. As you mentioned, rainfall totals in some locations could be up to 12 inches. And especially along the coastal community, storm surge could reach up to 10 feet. And of course, those extreme winds picking up, that could lead to widespread power outages and downed trees.
Schools in New Orleans are closed. Mandatory evacuations are underway up and down the Louisiana coast. Tell us how people have been preparing where you are.
So, Savannah, when you say hurricane, tropical storm here in Louisiana, residents typically know what to do, and that is to prepare and get prepared pretty quickly. And that's what they were doing yesterday as well as Monday. Grocery stores, there were some long lines, people stocking up on the essentials, food and water. Gas stations also pretty packed as folks are fueling up their vehicles. And yesterday we were at a sandbagging station. That was also a popular spot. Lots of folks packing up those sandbags, preparing their homes. But of course, later on today, as the weather takes a turn, officials are encouraging people to stay off the roadways.
Kathy, the National Hurricane Center says Francine expected to gain strength and actually accelerate before making landfall later today. How are local officials, how are state officials just getting ready to respond to those in need after the storm passes through, especially anyone who might be stranded in floodwaters?
Right. So the governor of Louisiana did issue an emergency declaration, and he said he's actually deployed members of the National Guard, and they are equipped with food, water, high water vehicles as well in case water rescues are necessary later on today. Of course, law enforcement throughout Louisiana, they're also stepping up the patrols, and they'll be monitoring the conditions over the next several hours.
All right, Kathy Park. Kathy, thank you so much.
For more on how Louisiana is preparing for Francine to make landfall, let's bring in Chief Thomas T.J. Morse of the Baton Rouge Police Department. Good morning, Chief. Thank you very much for your time on a busy morning. So parts of Louisiana are already starting to feel the impact of the storm, we know, but landfall still a few hours away. At this point, are you getting any reports of damage, any problems already? Before the worst comes, what's your message to people there in Baton Rouge as well?
Good morning, Savannah. Thank you very much for having me. So right now we're still kind of in that waiting period, and we're starting to see some rain, starting a little bit of wind pick up. We're expecting a lot more of that to happen in the next few hours and into the afternoon, but we're already prepared. And over here in South Louisiana, of course, we're not strangers to storms or hurricanes, so we have a lot of preparations that we've already done leading up to this. You can follow us on Facebook, download our app to get a lot of up-to-date things that are going on. brla.gov/emergency. Great place for the public to go and look. They have everything on there from road closures, sandbag locations, shelters, and even safety tips for running generators in case you have power outages.
This storm could be making landfall just as the sun is setting. For your officers, what are going to be the biggest challenges? And just what's your top advice for people to stay safe as the storm is hitting and then in the immediate aftermath?
Yeah, so for our officers, we have to think about their personal lives and their professional lives. They have to get their homes ready and make sure their families are good, and then come into work and make sure that the community's safe. We have our officers working extended shifts, so we have a little bit of more overlap, more coverage on the streets. We also have all of our officers that are normally in those specialized non-uniform divisions. They're out working in uniform today to be able to supplement, in case we have to do road closures or block roads because of flooding, directing traffic because of power outages. We learned a lot over the years. We have teams standing by with high water rescue vehicles and even boats that we can launch. So we're prepared as much as we can, and now we're just kind of in that waiting game.
President Biden joined the governor of Louisiana in declaring a state of emergency ahead of Francine's landfall. What kind of resources does that make available to you in these situations, and what resources do you need?
Yeah, so the federal declaration of emergency has been really helpful, as well as the state with the governor and locally with our mayor. A lot of great leadership. We're able to stand up those resources I was talking about, get the extra manpower, hours, and the financial responsibility that comes with that. Getting all the stakeholders in one room. We're stepping up our mayor's office of Homeland Security and Emergency Preparedness, as well as our own incident command systems. So we can get all the stakeholders, not only public safety, but all the community stakeholders in the same room when it comes to the energy folks, first aid, Red Cross, all those people being in the same room because of these declarations.
Chief Thomas T.J. Morse, thank you very much for joining us this morning. We appreciate your time. Stay safe. We're thinking of your community.
Thank you all very much. Appreciate it.
Let's get a closer look at the track of Hurricane Francine with your morning news now weather.
Meteorologist Violetta Yaz joins us now with more. Good morning. What's the latest?
Good morning, guys. Well, not too many changes with the latest advisory, at least not from when this intensified yesterday at about 7 o'clock in the evening into a hurricane. This is still a Category 1 storm right now, sitting about 245 miles to the south and west of Morgan City, Louisiana. Those winds still at 90 miles per hour. We're still seeing that northeast motion continue. You can see that eye starting to get a little better defined here, and we are expecting at least a bit of intensification before landfall. Of course, flooding rain going to be one of the biggest impacts. You can already see some of those rain bands moving into parts of southern Louisiana. We could be looking at 2 to 4 inches of rain per hour in some spots. And keep in mind, this area has been very active as of late. The soil in parts of the Gulf states is already saturated from recent rain. So unfortunately, in some spots, it's not going to take too much additional rainfall to either create or exacerbate any existing flooding. So some of the more intense flooding expected here in places like Baton Rouge and New Orleans, all the way up through Jackson, Mississippi, before that rain eventually spreads to the north and to the east as well. well as the storm weakens as it continues to move over land. Now, the storm surge is going to be a big part of this as well, unfortunately. So we'll see that surge accompanied by large breaking waves. So something to keep in mind here, especially in this area where you see the 5 to 10 foot storm surge. This is a very dangerous situation, especially for some of those parishes in southern Louisiana. Keep in mind, this situation is very unique in Louisiana. They've got very shallow water there just offshore. So when you get hours and hours of an onshore wind, that is going to create a very dangerous situation for a very vulnerable coastline. So something to keep in mind for that particular area. You can see that onshore wind expected to continue, and that's what really causes that water to pile up at the coast. So talking about the wind a little bit, you can see those strongest winds expected just east of the storm center with gusts up to 75 miles per hour in some spots. So extremely windy as well across eastern Louisiana, eventually pushing up into parts of Mississippi as well. So this is, of course, a very multifaceted storm, and we're watching that potential for intensification into a Category 2 perhaps this afternoon. Remember, we're only a couple of hours from landfall here, so time is running out, but the conditions are possible ahead of that landfall before the storm eventually does weaken further north up across parts of the Mississippi Valley.
All right. Violetta, we know we'll keep an eye on it. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Well, there's much more to come this hour, including continuing coverage on Hurricane Francine and the presidential debate.
Stay with us. Morning News Now. We'll be right back.
Welcome back. Today marks 23 years since the 9/11 terror attacks. On this day, back in 2001, almost 3,000 people lost their lives in a series of plane hijackings that shocked the world and began the war on terror.
This morning, the victims are being remembered in a ceremony at Ground Zero here in Lower Manhattan. President Biden expected to attend the event. Vice President Harris, former President Trump also expected to make appearances following last night's presidential debate.
NBC News correspondent Rahima Ellis is there for us right now. Good morning. Of course, this is a somber day for all of us, the anniversary of 9/11, especially, though, for the victims' families and friends. Talk to us about this, what this day means for them and how it's going to be marked there at the footprint of the Twin Towers.
For sure. Good morning to both of you. This is a day of reflection and remembrance for so many people, especially those here in New York. Thousands of people will come out to remember people that they lost and loved. And you're going to see what we've seen over the last 23 years, and that is that the grief and the pain of loss is still very raw for so many people here. The ceremony is going to begin at about 8:30. And to remember those nearly 3,000 people that you point out, there will be 6 moments of silence for when both of the Twin Towers fell. There'll be a moment of silence to remember when there was the attack on the Pentagon, and another moment of silence to remember when Flight 93 crashed into that field in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. They will also be remembering 6 people who died in 1993 when there was the other attack on the World Trade Center of a truck that was exploded in the basement of the World Trade Center. But more than anything, this will be a day for reflection. It's a painful day of reminding people across the country of what happened here 23 years ago. It's decades beyond that day. But as I said earlier, the pain of the grief that people felt is still very raw and very fresh for many people. Savannah and Joe.
Rahima, importantly, the focus of the day is on the victims. It does come in the middle of an election campaign. We mentioned both VP Harris and Mr. Trump will be attending today. What can we expect there?
We can expect that this will be a solemn and somber day. This is not a day for speeches, not here at the memorial site. There will be the governor and every dignitary that you can imagine in the tri-state area will be here. As you point out, also the president, vice president, and as well as former President Trump and his running mate, J.D. Vance, will be a part of ceremonies. But here, Joe, it's not about speeches. What we will hear is the names read of nearly 3,000 people who died, men, women, and children. That's the voices that we will hear. Their loved ones, their friends and families. Some of the children will even read the names of their parents, children who were not born, but born after 9/11. And it's a really poignant moment for them. Those are the voices that we're going to hear today. Joe and Savannah.
The other thing, right, 23 years. I mean, there's now a generation of young adults even who were not alive when this happened. How important has educating the younger generation about what did happen on that day become, and how's that being done?
It's really an interesting question, Savannah, because I did a story on this just a couple of years ago. And one of the things we found out is that there's not a whole lot being taught about 9/11 outside of the tri-state area. We went to a school and they had only one paragraph about 9/11. And one of the things that was mentioned is that what happened here is still a part of living history. But our children today have no life experience of this. And so educators are doing what they can to educate young children about this event, this tragedy that occurred here. We took a video of the 9/11 event to a school, and children literally cried. These were high school students a couple of years ago. They literally cried because they had not seen the images from that day. So educating our younger citizens about what happened here is something that is still in progress, and it is evolving in terms of how we go about it. Savannah and Joe.
Rahima, thank you very much for your reporting on such an important day. Thank you for the reflection.
Coming up, continuing coverage of today's two big stories, including last night's presidential debate between VP Harris and former President Trump. We're going to hear what voters have to say about their performances.
Plus, we are tracking Hurricane Francine as the Category 1 hurricane takes aim at the South. You're watching Morning News Now.
This morning, Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Trump are both claiming victory in their first presidential debate.
Polls show an extremely tight race, making last night's debate even more important to undecided voters, of course. The pair squared off on high-stakes issues, including the ongoing war in Ukraine. Here's some of what they had to say.
I want to get the war settled. I know Zelensky very well, and I know Putin very well. I have a good relationship, and they respect your president, okay? They respect me.
It is absolutely well known that these dictators and autocrats are rooting for you to be president again because they're so clear they can manipulate you with flattery and favors. And that is why so many military leaders who you have worked with have told me you are a disgrace.
This morning, the Harris campaign is calling for another debate, but so far the former president has declined to answer any questions on a second showdown. Well, just north of the site of last night's debate is Bucks County, Pennsylvania. Because of its population and location in a key battleground state, it is a place that could potentially swing the election. NBC News Now anchor Kate Snow spoke with some of those voters to get their take after the debate. Here's part of that conversation.
It's been really interesting watching with you all because I could see your reactions in real time. There were a lot of visceral reactions. In one word, if I can ask, how would you headline this debate? One word to describe what you saw, Lynn.
Well, it's 4 words. Same old, same old.
Hannah.
Manipulative.
And Andrew.
Lies on both sides.
Okay.
Lies.
None of you came in all undecided. Has anything changed your mind tonight? Is there anything you heard here that you thought, oh, yeah, I could go for that policy. I could stand with that candidate?
Not really. For me, I think Kamala had a good debate. I'm feel more favorably towards her than to Donald, but I'm not still. I'm still not
sure.
Not 100%.
The two of you women reacted very strongly when Harris was talking about abortion. When both candidates were talking about abortion rights, you reacted strongly to Donald Trump and his positions. You seemed emotional about it, Hannah.
Yes.
What was your thought on that? What was it about that part of the debate that struck you?
His misinformation. He sensationalized just so much facts or not things that are not facts that have been disproven.
When he was talking about,
he does it because that is what his supporters want to hear, and it really impacts who people like us if we choose to vote for him or not, because we know you are lying, but you're still saying it, and it's disgusting.
You all said it was the economy going in. Andrew, anything you heard that changes how you're thinking about their economic policies?
No, because at the end of the day, December and November is going to roll around, and they're going to pass. They're going to say we're going to shut down the government, and they're going to pass an omnibus, and they're going to spend trillions of dollars, and nothing else is going to change. They're just going to keep spending money uncontrollably. Donald Trump spent $6 trillion in 2019 and added that to our deficit. So absolutely not. They're spending money, and then it's coming back into the government, into the congressmen, into the Senate through funds, through PACs, through all the disgustingness.
Andrew, thank you so much.
Our thanks to Kate Snow for speaking with those voters. Now, Hillary Clinton won Bucks County in 2016 by about 2,000 votes in a closely contested race. Joe Biden won the county by a wider margin, more than 17,000 votes over Donald Trump back in 2020.
Let's check back in on Hurricane Francine as it grows in the warm waters of the Gulf and begins to make its way toward land.
The National Hurricane Center says that areas along the coastline could be hit with anywhere from 4 to 12 inches of rainfall and then a storm surge of 5 to 10 feet. The Category 1 hurricane is still expected to strengthen this morning as it makes its way to landfall later today.
NBC News correspondent Jesse Kirsch has been tracking the storm. He joins us now from New Orleans with the latest on the conditions. Jesse, good morning. So Francine has already gained strength this morning, now dealing winds of 90 miles an hour ahead of this expected landfall later this afternoon. What are you already seeing?
Yeah, hey, Joe and Savannah, good morning to you guys. Right now, based on what you just said, we wouldn't know that out here if I hadn't been talking with you. It is calm. It is quiet. I'm not feeling any kind of even light breeze right now, and it is dry on the ground. But during this storm here in New Orleans alone, we're looking at potentially 3 to 6 inches of rainfall and 3 to 5 inches, of rainfall per hour here when things really get intense. We're talking about potential for storm surge, flooding, and even tornadoes in New Orleans as we wait for Francine to make landfall. Already, we've seen from the outer bands of the storm, we've seen from those outer bands flooding in parts of Texas. And here in New Orleans yesterday, we saw people lined up around the block to get sandbags. They were lined up in their cars waiting for a chance to get sandbags from a city site. And when we went to get some supplies on our own at a grocery store, we saw much of the shelving devoted to bottled water already cleared out. So people are paying attention here clearly. Officials are urging people to shelter indoors when the storm makes landfall. And one other point I just want to make here, guys, we are, based on the current track, on the right side of Francine's path. And that is typically the side of a hurricane that sees the most devastating rain and wind. So certainly we will be bracing for what is to come here in New Orleans, guys.
Jesse, we actually heard something about an app as a resource for people that live in the state. It's something even the governor talked about on Tuesday. What exactly is that app? How can it help people?
Yeah, so it's an app that the government is asking people to donate here in Louisiana. The governor talking about it, and the idea behind this app is that it would allow people to customize settings. And the example that was given is that you could even say that you're a single mother with 3 children. So giving people a customizable option, helping them come up with safety plans. And it's called the Get a Game Plan app. So that's something that people can get online, and is something that is meant to give them real-time, constant, updated information throughout. And, of course, we will be watching this storm and continuing to update our viewers throughout the day and night.
All right, Jesse Kirsch. Jesse, thank you so much.
And please stay safe. We are joined now by Captain Josh Santini with the Grand Isle Fire Department. Grand Isle is on one of the barrier islands off Louisiana's coast, which is about 100 miles south of New Orleans. Captain, good morning. Thank you very much for joining us. First, what is the weather like at this point? Have any calls been made to your department for help?
No calls were made for any help so far. I got a call for about 4 o'clock this morning from the police chief saying that the water was just starting to rise on the east and west end of Grand Isle. It's got a little bit of flooding that's starting. We're just now starting to get a little bit of effects of the wind. Not too bad though, but we know what's coming and we're prepared for it.
I mean, the mayor issued a mandatory evacuation for residents on Monday, and that was before the storm's path shifted even closer to Grand Isle. What is your biggest concern for those who decided not to evacuate?
The main thing is water rising. We're not too concerned about the wind as bad, but mostly where it's passing at. It's been a while since we got a storm pass on the angle this one's passing on, so it's going to push a good bit of water we're expecting. So just mainly people just need to stay off the roads and just take proper precautions.
In a news conference last night, the president of Jefferson Parish, which includes Grand Isle, warned residents that they may not get a response to 911 calls once the storm hits there. Explain that. Why is that? And can any preparation help with that?
Well, once we get to over about 65 plus miles an hour winds, all our units stay grounded for our safety as well, unless it's something very, very critical. I got to look out for my guys' safety first, not to put my guys in danger. So other than that, we're just trying to let everybody know that once we get to that point, we'd rather them just stay bunkered down and do what's best, so not to have to put us in danger.
Captain Josh Santini, thank you very much for your time. We're thinking of your community. Stay safe.
Thank you.
All right, let's check in and get another update on your morning news now weather as we continue to track Hurricane Francine.
Meteorologist Violetta Yaz has the details. Good morning.
Good morning, guys. Yes, and as the captain said, preparation is key. And of course, a lot of that should be completed already because hurricane watches are in effect here for South Central Louisiana, extending all the way up through Baton Rouge. New Orleans right now in the hurricane watch, likely to be included eventually as the storm advances to the north and east. So let's take a look at these impacts. Flooding, rainfall, of course, a big concern. We're already seeing some of that rain advance onto the coastline. This is going to be the main threat zone in terms of that flooding. So New Orleans all the way up through Jackson, Mississippi. Flood alerts in effect, impacting at least 8 million people. So the flooding alone is going to be a big issue. But then, of course, we're going to be dealing with the storm surge, that persistent onshore wind with gusts up to about 80 miles per hour, that continuously pushing that water toward the shoreline. That's going to cause, of course, additional flooding with some of the strongest or highest surge, I should say, in that range of 5 to 10 feet. So a very dangerous situation. And of course, we're going to be watching this very closely as the day progresses.
That point you've been making about the shallow water, that's something you don't always think about, but that's key, isn't it?
Very low lying there, but you get several hours of onshore winds, 70, 80 miles per hour, just pushes everything forward. So very important that the preparations and everything be done already.
All right, Violetta, thank you.
Coming up, an alarming new study about early puberty in girls.
What researchers are saying about a possible link to popular personal care products. Your weekly checkup is next on Morning News Now. Welcome back. Time now for our weekly medical checkup. Now, if you're struggling to lose a few extra pounds in your middle, a new study shows that not all belly fat is created equal when it comes to your health.
Plus, Apple is adding a new feature to the latest version of their AirPods to help your hearing.
For more, let's bring in NBC News medical fellow Dr. Akshay Syal, who joins us now with these stories and more. Dr. Syal, good to have you with us. So belly fat understandably gets a bad rap, but a new study out of the University of Michigan found that one kind of fat may be better than others. So why is that?
Hey guys, yeah, some good news out there. So, belly fat tends to get a bad rap everywhere, and, rightly so. But this study is sort of saying it's a little bit more nuanced than that. And they find that, people who are obese, people who do have a lot of that belly fat, if they are exercising, even though the number on the scale may not be changing, we think that exercise may actually be remodeling how the body uses fat. And, it's a little bit complicated, but I'll do my best to explain it here, guys. And essentially, the belly fat with exercise becomes more flexible. And if that fat becomes more flexible, should you gain weight in the future, you should actually gain weight in the belly as opposed to getting it deep inside the body near the internal organs. So really all that is to say that even if that number on the scale isn't changing, just know that that exercise you may be doing may actually be remodeling some of that belly fat, guys. And so the doctor's orders here really don't pay too much attention to the scale, even if you are not seeing that weight drop off. If you are exercising about 30 minutes a day 5 times a week, you should still see some benefit. And guys, consistency is key. You really want to make it fun. You really want to make it part of a daily routine, not something that you sort of dread going to.
Let's switch gears here, something we just teased. As we previously reported, more young girls are starting puberty earlier, something that's been kind of head-scratching, but now we have some new research. It suggests a common chemical found in personal care products might have something to do with it. What is the chemical, and why could it be impacting in this way?
Yeah, Savannah, you're absolutely right. This has been happening for a few decades now, and people kind of, been scratching their heads as to sort of figuring out what's going on. Some things we think may be a part of it are obesity and other, endocrine chemicals in society. But really, this study is identifying one in particular, musk ambret. You can see on your screen there. It's a synthetic fragrance that's used in things like lotions and body oils and shampoos. And really, what they think, guys, it actually can cross into the brain and sort of activate some of those hormonal receptors that could lead to early puberty. And guys, that means, for girls before the age of 8 and for guys before the age of 9. And so really, doctors' orders here for those parents out there with young children who may be concerned, try to use scented-free products. You can certainly look for this on the ingredient list, guys, but I think the problem is, and you probably know this, is that a lot of these bottles will simply say fragrance as opposed to identifying what exactly it is. So if you're worried, just go scent-free.
Let's quickly talk about Apple making news this week, saying it plans to update the software that controls its AirPod headphones so they work as hearing aids. How do you think they could stack up against more traditional hearing aids?
Yeah, a big week for healthcare from Apple, guys. They announced that AirPods will have some hearing aid features as well as be able to take a hearing test. And, essentially, millions of people out there have hearing loss, about 1.5 billion across the globe. I mean, really the way this is going to work, Joe, is it's going to play certain sounds and ask you to sort of tap your ear if you hear that sound. So, doctor's orders here, guys. This is not for severe hearing loss. Apple is telling us mild to moderate. And for those out there who may be worried that their loved one has a hearing problem, I strongly urge you to take a hearing test. Hearing loss is linked to things like dementia, so definitely important to keep in mind.
All right.
Interesting.
Good advice there, Dr. Sayal. Thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Good to see you. Let's get you some money headlines now. Fasten your seatbelts. There could be more turbulence ahead in those marathon negotiations between Boeing and its union workers.
CNBC's Savannah Henao has that and some other news for your wallet. Savannah, good morning.
Hey, Joe. Hey, Savannah. Good morning to you. Yes, so Boeing says it bargained in good faith with its biggest union. The lead negotiator for the machinists tells Reuters a tentative contract deal has upset many workers who were hoping for higher wage hikes and better pensions. That agreement includes a 25% pay hike and a pledge to build the next commercial plane in the Seattle area. Now, if the union votes to reject the contract, they could go on strike as early as Friday. Starbucks' new CEO hits the ground running. In his second day on the job, Brian Niccol wrote an open letter to customers, employees, and shareholders saying his focus will be getting back to Starbucks. He says the company has drifted from its core, in which stores were only a place to get coffee, but also a gathering space. Niccol says menus can feel overwhelming, the product is inconsistent, and the wait is too long. He says Starbucks will invest in technology to improve the customer experience, supply chain, app, and mobile ordering platform. And Campbell's Soup. Well, Campbell's is dropping soup from its name to become the Campbell's Company. The move reflects the company's shift to other packaged goods, such as pasta sauces and goldfish snacks. Campbell's CEO telling investors the firm is focusing on 16 top brands across its meals and beverages lineup. Consumer goods companies have been seeing weaker demand as consumers trade down to cheaper alternatives, guys.
I like the little line there. Campbell and soup are never, ever getting, yet everyone will still call it Campbell soup.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, that's so true. Savannah, thank you.
All right, coming up, back on land.
Yeah, 9-month cruise that got worldwide attention has come to an end. 9 months. What passengers had to say about their viral vacation. Don't sail away. This is Morning News Now. Finally, this hour, you might remember that 9-month-long cruise around the world. It went viral on social media late last year. Well, it's officially come to an end.
After docking at Port Miami, NBC News correspondent Sam Brock caught up with some of those passengers to get the inside scoop on their whirlwind adventure.
Hi there. Well, when this trip first started back in December, you'll recall that passengers became instant social media rock stars. People were fascinated by how this could all go down. Can you really spend that many months with your sibling or significant other? How many birthdays did they celebrate on this cruise? The answer, by the way, is almost 6,000. In the end, the one-of-a-kind cruise left many sad to leave. Dubbed the ultimate world cruise.
This is 9 months, and right now we are in Miami.
Passengers on Royal Caribbean's Serenade of the Seas just spent the better part of a year with thousands of total strangers.
It's just crazy, all the things we've done, the places we've seen, the people we've met that have come and gone.
To set the stage, the journey kicked off in the Americas with stops at Christ the Redeemer and Machu Picchu, ultimately covering 7 continents, 8 world wonders, and 65 countries.
I've never been on TikTok. And all of a sudden, I was a TikTok sensation. I am having withdrawals. I need to clean.
The public vacuuming up videos from passengers like Adita Larson, who came with her husband and plunked down roughly $120,000. What inspired you to do this?
My husband had just retired, and we are avid cruises. They told us the price, and I looked at my husband, and he just said, "You're going to book it anyways."
To the Sweatshy sisters, both students.
We're going to take you guys into our room. Boom, we got decoration.
Who crafted a sweet dorm and connected with staff.
The community on board was incredible, and they held us accountable for our homework.
The trip was not without some rough waters. Videos of stormy weather racked up millions of views, And early on, the ship had to change course on account of the war in the Middle East. Still, the Serenade completed 75,000 miles with no major issues reported so far. And as for the Sweatsheets, a clear highlight during a final stretch that stopped in New York, where they hung out on the plaza with Hoda and Al. A trip many passengers said they were sad to see end.
It's just been truly the adventure of a lifetime.
And for those wondering, there will be a reunion cruise. The exact dates have not yet been announced, and on that reunion cruise, Royal Caribbean CEO says they're going to be announcing the next Ultimate World Cruise, and the reunion passengers get first dibs. Back to you.
All right, Sam Brock, what a story. Thank you very much.
That is going to do it for this hour of Morning News Now.
Stay with us. The news continues right now.
Right now on Morning News Now, making their cases, a fiery night for presidential politics playing out in prime time, starting with this awkward handshake. Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump trading fierce jabs on hot-button issues ranging from abortion to the Middle East and, of course, the economy here at home.
She doesn't have a plan. She copied Biden's plan, and it's like 4 sentences, like run, spot, run. 4 sentences that are just, oh, we'll try and lower taxes. She doesn't have a plan. Take a look at her plan. She doesn't have a plan.
It's important to remind the former president, you're not running against Joe Biden, you're running against me. Donald Trump was fired by 81 million people. So let's be clear about that. And clearly he is having a very difficult time processing that.
She has no policy. Everything that she believed 3 years ago and 4 years ago is out the window. She's going to my philosophy now. In fact, I was going to send her a MAGA hat.
We're covering last night's one-on-one from all angles, including a closer look at both candidates' vision for America if their White House ticket is punched come November, plus a swift endorsement of the vice president coming just minutes after she left the debate stage.
Also this morning, we are tracking Francine, now a Category 1 hurricane that's spinning just off Louisiana's Gulf Coast. We're on the ground with the latest conditions as millions there prepare for impact later today. Good morning, and thank you for joining us on what is a very busy news morning. I'm Savannah Sellers.
And I'm Joe Fryer. Let's begin with that contentious presidential debate between Vice President Harris and former President Trump.
Yeah, last night saw a clear contrast between the two candidates on many issues as they both tried to convince voters they have a better plan for the future of the country. Let's start things off with our chief White House correspondent, Peter Alexander, who is in Philadelphia.
Savannah, good morning to you. The Harris campaign is feeling very good about the vice president's performance last night. A senior Harris campaign official before the debate was even over telling NBC News, we have an embarrassment of riches, too many moments to amplify. Different story on the Trump side. The former president at times appearing agitated and angry immediately after the debate, saying that it was, quote, very unfair. And just this morning on Fox News dialing in and saying it felt like 3 against 1.
The first ever in-person meeting between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump began with an unexpected handshake initiated by the vice president.
Kamala Harris. What's up? Good debate.
But after that moment of civility, things quickly turned combative.
The worst vice president in the history of our country.
This is so rich. Coming from someone who has been prosecuted.
Harris immediately putting Trump on defense.
You're going to hear from the same old tired playbook. A bunch of lies, grievances, and name-calling.
Trump attacking the Biden-Harris administration on the economy and immigration.
This has been a disaster for people, for the middle class, but for every class. On top of that, we have millions of people pouring into our country.
Harris delivering on her strategy to try to get under Trump's skin.
I have talked with military leaders, some of whom worked with you, and they say you're a disgrace.
Also referencing his refusal to accept the 2020 election results.
Donald Trump was fired by 81 million people. Clearly, he is having a very difficult time processing that.
Which Trump doubled down on when asked about his recent comment that he lost by a whisker.
I said that?
Are you now acknowledging that you lost in 2020?
No, I don't acknowledge that at all.
In one of the night's most memorable moments, Harris mocking his obsession with crowd size.
During the course of his rallies, he talks about fictional characters like Hannibal Lecter. He will talk about windmills cause cancer. And what you will also notice is that people start leaving his rallies early out of exhaustion and boredom.
Trump seeming to take the bait.
People don't go to her rallies. There's no reason to go. We have the biggest rallies.
And then in the same response, veering from an attack on Harris's record into debunked conspiracy theories about immigrants in Ohio that have grown on the right in recent days.
They're eating the dogs, the people that came in. They're eating the cats. They're eating the pets of the people that live there.
You talk about extreme.
The two also sparring over abortion rights.
What I did is something for 52 years. They've been trying to get Roe v. Wade into the states. And through the genius and heart and strength of 6 Supreme Court justices, we were able to do that.
Pregnant women who want to carry a pregnancy to term, suffering from a miscarriage, being denied care in an emergency room because the healthcare providers are afraid they might go to jail, and she's bleeding out in a car in the parking lot. She didn't want that.
The former president linking Harris to President Biden, targeting their administration's handling of the economy.
I've never seen a worse period of time. People can't go out and buy cereal or bacon or eggs or anything else.
And its chaotic withdrawal from Afghanistan.
That was one of the most incompetently handled situations anybody has ever seen.
As Trump resisted saying whether he supported Ukraine winning its war with Russia.
Do you believe it's in the U.S. best interest for Ukraine to win this war, yes or no?
I think it's the U.S. best interest to get this war finished and just get it done.
In closing statements, Harris hoping to leave voters with an optimistic message.
We're not going back. It's time to turn the page.
While Trump accused her of setting the country back.
She just started by saying she's going to do this, she's going to do that, she's going to do all these wonderful things. Why hasn't she done it? She's been there for 3.5 years.
And just as soon as last night's debate ended, the conversation quickly turned to the possibility of a second debate. The Harris campaign posting in a statement that it would like there to be a second debate between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris next month. Trump's response, he, of course, has said in the past that he was open to more debates in the future. But this morning, he appears to be waffling on that. Just moments ago on Fox News saying, I don't know if I want to do another debate, adding, I'd be less inclined to because we had a great night. And perhaps as important, or at least getting as much attention as anything that happened on the stage last evening, is what happened afterward. The celebrity endorsement of Taylor Swift, posting in an Instagram statement to her 283 million followers that she is endorsing Kamala Harris and Tim Walz. Savannah, back to you.
And we'll have more on that in a bit. Peter, thank you very much.
NBC News senior business correspondent Christine Roman joins us now with more on what we learned about the candidates' economic platforms and policies last night. Let's talk about the economy. The polls have been telling us what we've seen time and time again. Voters believe former President Trump is going to handle the economy better than Vice President Harris. Does the debate change that at all, or just cement that opinion when it comes
Well, you had the former president trying to say that Americans are living in squalor, that the U.S. economy is a complete disaster and a wreck. And he's very hyperbolic. He's always been that way, you know, saying that it's the worst inflation in history, which is not true, saying that the United States is not pumping any oil, which is not true. You know, so fact checking it, you know, he really goes to the hyperbolic, it is the worst of the worst. What she was trying to do is say, look, the economy right now is about affordability. And I'm the one with the plan about the middle class, about the American kitchen table, to try to make things more affordable. So she was trying to cast the two visions on the economy. He was really trying to get into that vibe, those bad vibes about the economy, and say, it'll be better again if I'm back in the office.
Let's get more specific about Harris's performance as well as her plan.
Sure.
What she calls it is an opportunity economy. What does that term mean? And I ask that knowing that many voters, and we heard them with Kate Snow last night, were wanting specifics from the vice president that they felt they don't have.
So, you know, she's trying to craft her own way forward, not just Biden-Harris agenda, but her way forward. And she talks about this opportunity economy as focusing on the middle class, support for example, new families, more tax credits for families. We're going to be hearing more. We didn't hear it last night, which I think was a lost opportunity about childcare. But we're going to be hearing more about the care economy and about paid leave and about things that can help working families with these high costs that make it so hard to be in the middle class. But she's had 7 weeks to sort of
put this all together. And that is one place where wanting more specifics, clearly.
What we did here is, he attacked her over inflation, as you mentioned.
Yep.
She attacked him about his tariffs plan, which is sort of his big economic plan right now that people are still learning a lot about.
Yeah, tariffs and tax cuts are his big plan. Both of those things are expensive, and both of those things are hard to pay for. The tariffs in particular, she called it a middle-class consumer tax, which economists agree with, that when you put tariffs on goods, Donald Trump always says that the countries pay the tariffs, that China writes us a check for the tariffs that he puts on China. That is not true. Consumers and importers pay that price. So she's equating that with a consumer tax. I also thought it was interesting that she brought up the Goldman Sachs analysis.
Yeah.
You don't often hear that kind of thing in a debate, but Goldman Sachs did analyze these two campaigns and what we know about what they would do with the economy. And because of those tariffs and because of unpaid for tax cuts, Goldman Sachs says the economy would grow more under a Harris presidency than it would under a Donald Trump presidency.
Notably Wharton and alma mater as well. For the
yes,
former
exactly.
president. Yeah.
Right.
All right, Christine,
Nice to see
thank
you
you so
guys.
much. Good to have you with us.
Let's get an update now on the hurricane making its way toward the Louisiana coast this morning.
Hurricane Francine is expected to bring life-threatening conditions along the Gulf Coast once it makes landfall later today. The Category 1 storm has been continuing to grow faster and stronger throughout the morning. Francine now has sustained wind speeds of 90 miles an hour. Thousands of people are bracing for up to 10 feet of storm surge.
NBC News correspondent Kathy Park is live for us in Baton Rouge. Kathy, good morning. So as Francine continues to grow, those dangerous conditions could be felt in many places along the coast, Louisiana, all the way toward Alabama. What are you seeing right now? How is it out there?
Hey, Savannah, good morning to you. Well, the sun is trying to come out, but we're still in a wait-and-see mode right now. We're told that within the next hour or so, the outer bands of Francine should make its way to our area, so the winds will likely pick up. The rain could potentially start falling, but really the height of the storm here in Baton Rouge, we're told that the wind gusts could reach up to 70 miles per hour, so conditions will deteriorate quickly over the next several hours.
Kathy, it's not just rain and flooding that threatens the area. A few tornadoes are even possible today. Will likely cause life-threatening surf, rip current conditions. What are you hearing from officials about the most dangerous aspects of this storm and how they are planning to respond to those who are in need in the midst of it?
Yeah, so going into the storm, Joe, the biggest concerns, one of them certainly is flash flooding throughout the coastal communities. As you mentioned, storm surge could reach up to 10 feet, and then we're going to get dumped with a lot of rain, up to 12 inches in some locations. So flooding, a big concern, widespread concern. And then, of course, these wind gusts I was telling you about. Right now, it's about 90 miles per hour as it inches closer to the coastal communities, but obviously it'll lose its punch a little bit, but this could lead to widespread power outages, and of course officials are encouraging people to stay off the roadways as Francine moves its way here.
All right, Kathy, thank you very much, and please stay safe.
For more on Hurricane Francine, let's bring in the mayor of Baton Rouge, Sharon Weston Broom. Mayor, good to have you with us. So Baton Rouge, as we just saw there, in the center of the storm's predicted path. Talk about how your city is preparing.
Well, our city has prepared over the years by investing ARPA dollars in our drainage and waterway systems to make sure we clean them out. And so we've already cleaned out like 30 tons of debris. That's one way we prepared. We've also made sure that we are ready to respond to any power outages, trees that are down in our area. And our DPW, Department of Public Works, has already put up barricades. We have people, of course, our citizens are getting sandbags. What is really important is that this is not our first experience. And since our traumatic flood of 2016, we have indeed been Red Stick ready.
The Mississippi River flows right through the downtown area. Of course, a huge concern in any storm, but with what we're seeing here, storm surge concerns, flooding, how concerned are you about that in the city?
Well, we certainly are alert to the Mississippi, possibly rising. We are also alert to all of our tributaries that surround us. And so we're prepared for flash flooding. We are going to immediately address that. But as I said, I believe that the preparation that we have taken over the years as it relates to our stormwater management issues has helped to prepare us for this time. We've cleaned out major waterways like our Amite and Comite rivers. All of that contributes to mitigating a very negative impact.
What is your primary message to residents of Baton Rouge right now as this storm approaches?
My primary message to my residents, stay calm. I believe that they have already made preparation in terms of water, food, things that they need, flashlights, etc. I want people to stay off of the roadways, and I want our citizens to stay calm.
All right. Mayor Sharon Weston Broome, we're thinking of you and your community right now in the coming hours. Please continue to stay safe.
Thank you.
Let's take a closer look at Hurricane Francine and get a check on your Morning News Now weather.
Meteorologist Violetta Yaz is tracking the storm. Violetta, good morning.
Good morning, guys. Yes, we've been watching this, of course, all morning long, and Baton Rouge specifically in that hurricane warning area, along with a pretty large swath of south central Louisiana. So that is likely where we're going to be seeing landfall later this afternoon and evening, somewhere between Baton Rouge and New Orleans, likely leaning westward toward Baton Rouge. This is still a Category 1 storm with winds at 90 miles per hour. The hurricane hunters are actually investigating the storm right now, so we should hopefully have some good information for the 11 o'clock update from the National Hurricane Center. Now, that northeast movement is expected to continue, and again, that landfall likely coming later this afternoon or evening. Where you're seeing the sort of a purple shading here, that's where we're expecting some of the most intense flooding and the heaviest rainfall rates of 2 to 4 inches per hour. We're already getting some rain here into coastal Louisiana, but of course, that main band of rain extending well offshore, so still have many hours to go. And this area has also picked up quite a bit of rain as of late. So it's not going to take too much additional rainfall, unfortunately, to trigger or even worsen any potentially lingering flooding. You can see where that heaviest rain will be, eastern Louisiana, all the way up into parts of western Tennessee. Meanwhile, the winds, of course, are going to be a big issue as well. That likely to cause power outages with winds up to 70 or even 80 miles per hour, and the strongest of which expected in eastern Louisiana. And that wind, of course, helping to sort of cause another impact, which is one of the most deadly as it pertains to hurricanes, the storm surge. You get that really prolonged wind of 70 miles per hour in some spots for many, many hours, and especially in an area like this with an already vulnerable coastline, 5 to 10 foot storm surge possible there across parts of eastern Louisiana. And a sort of lesser talked about aspect of these hurricanes is the severe weather threat. On the eastern side, we tend to get severe weather, severe thunderstorms and tornadoes. That's going to be possible today as well as the storm approaches eastern Louisiana up into parts of Mississippi, Alabama, and even western Florida. We're likely to see some tornadoes as we head into the afternoon, and you can see some of those rain bands already moving in, and we can probably expect the worst of the conditions from about 3 o'clock this afternoon through about 11 o'clock tonight for this particular area.
This is a region that knows these storms well. All right, Violetta, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
We have much more to come on this hour of Morning News Now, including some trouble on the tarmac when a Delta Airlines flight collided with a smaller plane in Atlanta yesterday. More on the investigations now underway into what went wrong.
But first, after the break, a critical show of support in Ukraine this morning as Secretary of State Blinken arrives in Kyiv for a series of high-profile meetings. What this visit could mean for the future of the country's escalating war with Russia. Next.
Welcome back. This morning, the victims of 9/11 are being remembered 23 years after the terror attacks. Nearly 3,000 people were killed on that day back in 2001 in a series of plane hijackings that stunned the world. Both Vice President Harris and former President Trump are expected to attend the commemoration ceremony in New York one day after their presidential debate. NBC News correspondent Stephanie Gosk is in New York with the latest. Stephanie, good morning.
Savannah, good morning. You know, the day started off A lot like this one, clear, sunny, warm, but by the end of the day, the course of history was forever changed. The ceremony that is held on this day has changed very little in the last 23 years, but the purpose of it has really broadened. It is as much now about sharing the story of what happened that day as it is about remembering. It always attracts dignitaries as well as the families and firefighters that will be here today, along with, as you mentioned, the two candidates for president, fresh off the debate stage in Philadelphia.
6 bells, 6 moments of silence to mark the shockwaves that morning 23 years ago. Planes hitting in New York, at the Pentagon, in a field in Pennsylvania, the Twin Towers collapsing. 2,977 people were killed.
Alvin Peter Kappelman Jr.
Their names are read aloud here at Ground Zero every year. In attendance today, President Joe Biden, along with Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump, just hours after they faced off in Philadelphia. In the middle of a contentious election battle, there may be a lesson from 9/11.
We hope people will set aside divisions and fractiousness and come together, recognize the unity, the compassion, and the courage that characterized the aftermath of 9/11.
Beth Hillman is the president of the 9/11 Memorial and Museum. Part of her mission, reaching a generation of young people who need to learn about 9/11. More than 100 million Americans who were born after 2001 or were too young to remember the tragic day.
The museum teaches about the day, but it also teaches about the aftermath. How has that changed?
Well, I think we continue to learn more. History isn't static. We look at how we've learned to better understand terrorism, even as we haven't been able to actually end it yet.
The museum gets millions of visitors every year.
It really makes you realize how terrible it was.
The Gordon Smith family lives in South Carolina.
Why was it important to come here today?
We have 2 kids who didn't live through this, right? And so it's telling a story to them.
Caroline Hurry and Peyton Hewlin go to Auburn University.
You may not understand what it felt like on the day, but do you think you understand at this point the effect that it had on the country?
Yeah, I think the older I get, the more I can see it.
Never forget also means making sure a new generation understands.
Later on this evening, there will be the annual tribute of light, those 2 beams of light that go from dusk until dawn. On a clear day, Savannah, you can see them from 60 miles away.
Stephanie, thank you very much.
Get some international headlines now. New this morning, Secretary Antony Blinken is in Ukraine's capital for a series of talks about the ongoing war.
International correspondent Claudio Lavanga has that and other details for us this morning. Claudio, good morning.
Savannah, Joe, good morning. Well, that's right. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken has arrived in Ukraine for a series of important meetings, not only with President Zelensky, but also other senior government officials there. Now, his visit to Ukraine comes at a critical moment in the war as Russia continues to advance in the east of the country. Among the topic of discussions will probably be Zelensky's request for longer-range missiles and the approval to use them against targets inside Russia. So far, Western allies have voiced doubts about this move, but overnight, President Biden suggested there is room for compromise. In other news, Israel launched multiple strikes across southern Lebanon over the last 24 hours. The Israeli Defense Forces said it struck 30 Hezbollah launchers and what it called terrorist infrastructure sites that pose a threat to Israeli civilians. The IDF said that one Hezbollah commander at least was killed in the strikes and that no civilian casualties were reported. And let's end this tour of the world in Mexico, where hundreds of protesters broke into the Senate as lawmakers weighed on a controversial plan to overhaul the country's judiciary to allow citizens to choose all of the country's judges in the future. The plan, championed by President Obrador, sparked weeks of protests by judicial employees and law students who say that such a move could threaten judicial independence and undermine the system of checks and balances. Back to you guys.
All right, Claudio, thank you so much.
Well, back here in the U.S., it was a frightening scene at Atlanta Hartsfield Airport on Tuesday morning. A Delta Airlines flight heading to Tokyo clipped another smaller plane, dislodging its tail fin as it was on the tarmac before taking off. NBC News senior correspondent Tom Costello is at Atlanta Hartsfield with more on the incident. Tom, good morning.
Yeah, so this is the world's largest airport, and what happens when one of the biggest planes in the world collides with one of the smaller regional jets? Well, in fact, the damage appears to have been catastrophic. The question right now is who's to blame, the control tower or maybe the pilots? At the nation's busiest airport, a slow speed but high impact accident and a lot of damage. It happened between Delta Flight 295 and Endeavor Airways Flight 5526, a Delta regional jet. The impact from the larger plane literally sheared the tail clear off the smaller aircraft, though the crew wasn't sure what happened.
We just hit something on the taxiway. Could you tell us what it was?
It was air traffic control that advised the pilots of both planes to stay put.
It's going to be detached from the aircraft. It just appears that it's completely detached from that the fuselage area.
Flight 295, an Airbus 350, Delta's largest plane, with the wingspan of just over 212 feet, was taxiing for takeoff shortly after 10 a.m. headed for Tokyo, when its wing collided with the tail of one of Delta's commuter flights.
It was just really chaotic.
Nathan Pike, a producer from KSHB 41, NBC's Kansas City affiliate, was on board the smaller plane when it was struck.
Suddenly, it felt like when you're on the interstate and you hit the rumble strips, and then it just got louder, more violent. You could hear the metal scraping against the outside of the plane, and it was just shaking really badly.
Ray McKibber was on a nearby plane and saw the immediate aftermath.
It was definitely a David and Goliath type situation. You could tell kind of which one kind of got the worst of the damage.
It happened at the intersection of two taxiways in Atlanta. No injuries. All passengers were rebooked, and the airport reported minimal impact on operations. The FAA and NTSB have both launched investigations.
It's just too early to tell right now whether air traffic control properly did its job or whether the Airbus A350 crew did its job, or was it a combination of the both?
Regardless of who's to blame, passengers like Nathan Pike are just happy to be safe.
The adrenaline has worn off now. Right now, I just want to be with my family.
Yeah, we mentioned this is an FAA and NTSB investigation. They will be listening to the cockpit voice recorders. What exactly were the pilots saying to each other during, before, and after this incident? What were the instructions from the control tower? Very often, it's not one thing that leads to an incident. It is a cascading series of things, so they're going to have to piece it all together. But the damage to this Bombardier regional jet, it very well may put that plane out of service forever. Back to you.
All right, Tom Costello, so many questions. Thank you so much.
Coming up, an overnight endorsement from the one and only Taylor Swift.
The message the superstar posted to her 283 million Instagram followers shortly after last night's debate, throwing her support behind Vice President Harris. How the Harris campaign is reacting this morning. That is next. Stay with us.
Welcome back. Today, the race for the White House returns to the campaign trail after the first and possibly only debate between Vice President Harris and former President Trump.
The gloves came off as the two presidential hopefuls sparred on topics from abortion to immigration to the economy. Take a listen.
I've never seen a worse period of time. People can't go out and buy cereal or bacon or eggs or anything else.
His plan is to do what he has done before, which is to provide a tax cut for billionaires and big corporations.
Moments after last night's debate, music superstar Taylor Swift endorsed Vice President Harris for president. In an Instagram post, Swift called Harris a steady-handed, gifted leader who fights for the rights and causes she believes in. Just minutes after the presidential debate ended, the biggest pop star in the world weighed in. Taylor Swift endorsing the vice president, writing on Instagram, "I will be casting my vote for Kamala Harris and Tim Walz in the 2024 presidential election." Swift says she's supporting Harris because she fights for the rights and causes I believe need a warrior to champion them, adding, "I believe we can accomplish so much more in this country if we are led by calm and not chaos." The Grammy Award winner indicated her endorsement was prompted in part by former President Trump's use of AI-generated images, falsely suggesting she had endorsed him, saying the post made her realize she needed to be clear about her plans for the election, writing, "It really conjured up my fears around AI and the dangers of spreading misinformation. The simplest way to combat misinformation is with the truth." Harris's running mate Tim Walz reacting to the endorsement last night.
I am incredibly grateful. That's the type of courage we need in America.
Trump weighing in on the endorsement this morning.
I was not a Taylor Swift fan. It was just a question of time.
Are you ready for it?
Swift's massive presence and appeal to younger women have made her a highly sought-after endorsement, with more than 280 million Instagram followers, a blockbuster tour, and constant presence in the headlines. According to the New York Times, when Swift posted on Instagram last year encouraging followers to register to vote, the site she linked to later reported over 35,000 new registrations that day. In Swift's Netflix documentary, Miss Americana, she admitted she wished she had expressed her political opinions for the first time back in 2016 to help defeat President Trump.
I'm sad that I didn't 2 years ago, but I can't change that. I'm saying right now that this is something that I know is right, and you guys, I need to be on the right side of history.
Swift signed her Harris endorsement post "Childless Cat Lady," a reference to controversial comments made by Trump's running mate J.D. Vance to describe women who do not have children. The 34-year-old even included a photo of herself holding her cat, Benjamin Button, the pop culture icon telling followers, "I've done my research and I've made my choice. Your research is all yours to do, and the choice is yours to make." And the Harris campaign quickly jumped on the endorsement, already selling Swift-like friendship bracelets to capitalize.
See a lot of those. Yeah. All right, now to medical news, where there's new guidance this morning from the FDA regarding breast cancer screening.
As of yesterday, all mammogram facilities are now required to include an assessment of breast density. Having dense breasts can increase the risk of breast cancer and also make it harder to detect.
Lorraine Frazier is both the dean of Columbia University School of Nursing and a breast cancer survivor. She joins us now on set with the latest. Good morning. Thank you so much for being here. So good to have you with us. First, explain this concept, breast density, and its relation to breast cancer, what that can indicate.
Yeah. Breast density is complex, right? You'll hear people say, "I have dense breasts." Yes. And we really don't know. We really can't tell if you have dense breasts. I can't tell, you can't tell by feeling or any other way. The only way to tell if you have dense breasts is through mammography. So that's really important to know. You may think, doesn't affect me. I don't have dense breasts. That may not be the situation. But dense breasts are more complex with glandular tissue, and they are more prone to breast cancer. I think the issue for us today, though, is to think about dense breasts. It's very difficult to detect breast cancer in dense breasts on mammography because they show up as looking white. Cancer shows up white. So they say it's like looking for a polar bear in a snowstorm. You just can't tell. And that's critical because you can go home with a clear mammography and still have breast cancer. That happened to me. I never missed mammography. A mammogram. Even during the pandemic, I went. I was always told that I was cancer-free. Then when I felt something, the radiologist said, "You know, we would have sent you home with a clear mammogram." Wow. But I had felt it. So dense breasts, you need to know that you may have a clear mammogram, but it may not actually be a clear mammogram. So you have to be careful.
So if women are hearing this and they're wondering, do I have dense breasts? What do you say to them?
You will find out when you have a mammogram. And thank goodness the federal regulations now require that the mammography center notify you within 30 days if you have dense breasts or not. And that's good, but it's not the whole story. Think about it. You've had a mammography, 3 weeks have gone by, all you hear is, "I'm clear." That's all you want to hear, right? Because it's not fun. Then you get either an email or something in the mail saying you have dense breasts. That's when this becomes important. You can put it away. You're busy. Everybody's busy. Everybody's too busy. Or you can look at that and say, you know what? I need to talk to my healthcare provider and see if I need additional screening. And you say, well, it's, just another year to my next mammogram. A year can be a big deal in some cancers that are aggressive, so you don't want to wait.
And very quickly, what age should you start?
40. Start at 40.
Start at 40.
Yes.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Yes.
Such important information and can totally save lives. And thank you for sharing your personal story as well.
You're welcome. You're
Great
welcome.
To have you
Good
here.
to be here. Thank you.
We do have some breaking economic data to bring you this morning.
Yeah, inflation came in at 0.2% month over month for August. Year over year, inflation came in up 2.5%, which was less than expected.
Joining us now to talk more about all this breaking news, NBC News business and data correspondent Brian Chung. Brian, talk about this 2.5%. That's pretty impressive, isn't it?
Yeah, good morning, guys. That 2.5% figure, that's the slowest pace of inflation in 3 years. So yes, this is a big deal. So again, if we're talking about the yearly rise in prices, how much more expensive are things now this year compared to this time last year? And we got that figure at 2.5% if you're looking at the August 2024 to August 2023 period. That's a slower pace than the 2.9% figure we had seen in the July to July period, and noticeably slower if you look over time compared to the almost 9% inflation rate we had been seeing about 2 years ago. So yes, inflation has slowed, and we've kind of been flatlining around this over 3% figure. But this 2.5% figure, which you just got, which would be around here, again, it's a not market improvement, but it is some slight improvement over the previous readings we have been getting. Inflation is slowing in this country.
Tell us by category, what are some of the price changes we're seeing?
Yeah, and we're seeing some of the price changes noticeably in the areas that we feel it the most, in food and energy. So let me explain. What we're looking at here are now monthly figures. So this is the June to July figures. Food prices went up by 0.2%. In the month of August, it went up by 0.2%, or rather, it actually went up by only 0.1%. So that's a slowdown. And then energy prices, check this out. It was flatlined between June and July. Gasoline prices have fallen further since that point in time. So we've seen a decline in energy prices, down 0.8%. And then shelter, this is the one area of concern. Again, this is the biggest cost for most American families. It did accelerate in terms of the monthly pace. It was up to 0.4% in the month of July. It actually went up even further to 0.5%. So that is something we're going to have to watch. But look, food and energy, that's the thing that Americans feel the most when they go to the pump, when they go to the grocery store. That is indeed slowing on the inflation side.
So the Federal Reserve finally meets next week. We know at this point they're going to cut interest rates, but what exactly can we expect, and what does this information tell them?
Yeah, their next meeting is next Wednesday, and we had already been hearing from Federal Reserve officials that, look, with inflation coming down and concerns about unemployment going up from the jobs report, which we've been talking about at the top of the month, well, maybe it's time to cut back on interest rates. Now, the question now is how large of an interest rate cut do they do? This would be the first interest rate cut since they dramatically started ratcheting rates up in the post-pandemic period. But that could be welcome news for those that are on the sidelines of this housing market, where they've been waiting for lower mortgage rates, which have already fallen, or maybe want some relief on their credit card or also auto loan debt.
Other good news, Brian, wage growth continues to outpace inflation. Between that and this report we're getting here, do we think that we will actually start to hear from Americans that they feel a little better about their money? Because no matter all these stats, I'm hearing from voters I'm talking to, like, people feel like it's so hard to go to the grocery store. Will this start to change?
And that's an important point to make, right? I mean, these numbers, when you talk about food only going up by 0.1%, well, it's still going up. And yes, that is a slower pace, but it is not necessarily what Americans are feeling. But again, when we talk about the economy, we have to talk about it within the context of money coming in and money going out. Inflation is how much you spend, money going out. Wage growth is how much is money coming in, right? 3.8%, that's how much more your wallets grew by over the yearly period, which you got from the jobs report. Inflation today showing 2.5%. Your wages on a national average, again, not everyone's feeling that, but on a national average, is growing faster than the pace of inflation, and that is welcome news.
All right, Brian, thank you so much.
There's going to be much more morning news now right after this. Stick around.
Here's Savannah Guthrie.
Good morning, everybody. We come on the air as the nation is marking 23 years since the terror attacks of September 11th. Events getting underway this morning across the country to honor and remember the nearly 3,000 people who died already. Leaders gathering at the World Trade Memorial site in Lower Manhattan, which is where we find NBC's Stephanie Gosk as these solemn remembrances get ready to begin. Stephanie, good morning.
Good morning, Savannah. You know, 23 years, and this commemoration really hasn't changed all that much the way that it's held. You still have the 6 bells, the 6 moments of silence, marking when the planes hit the towers, they hit the Pentagon, that field in Pennsylvania, and also, of course, when the towers fell. This is an event that has not just family and firefighters, but also dignitaries. You have the president who's here today. You have both candidates who are running for president. They have arrived along with vice presidential candidate J.D. Vance. He is here as well. You also have the head of the Department of Homeland Security, Alejandro Mayorkas. You'll remember that the Department of Homeland Security exists because of what happened on 9/11. You know, over the years, the message of this ceremony has really broadened because now you have a whole generation of people who are now young adults who were not alive during 9/11. This is a day as much about remembrance as it is about sharing the story of that day. I spoke with the head of the museum and the memorial, who told me that a good portion of her job is reaching that younger generation to share the story. But here in New York City, especially for those people who were here that day, this is a solemn day. It is quiet down here in Lower Manhattan, and it has been that way every 9/11 for the past 23 years, Savannah.
We pause and remember this morning, as we do every year. And as you mentioned, Stephanie, there will be moments of silence observed throughout this morning, signifying those morning's events as they unfolded. The first will happen in about 30 seconds from now, as the time 8:46, when the first plane hit the North Tower of the World Trade Center and thousands died in an instant. We will hear speeches, remembrances, world leaders there, and we will pause now as this moment of silence is observed and the nation remembers.
Right, quick, march. Now.
23 years ago today, a bright blue Tuesday morning when everything changed in 2000. 977 people lost their lives. And later this morning at that memorial site, those names will be read. Stephanie Gosk, it's always so poignant not only to have each person individually recognized and remembered, often read those names by their family members, their descendants, kids who've now grown up with this, but also the sheer length of time it takes, hours to read each of those names.
Yeah, that's right, Savannah, and they do it every year. And as you say, you know, through the years, you watched spouses do it. You watched children. Now you have the grandchildren that some of those people never even met, and standing up and reading those names. And you know, I have to tell you that even though I have been to the memorial site so many times, I have watched this ceremony so many times, but it is impactful, equally as impactful every time you see it. You hear those bagpipes, you think about how that day started, how it felt like this day, and how every year, especially in September, whether it's 9/11 or throughout the month, when you have a day like this, it's so beautiful, but you cannot help but think about the tragedy of the day and all those lives that were lost, Savannah.
We will never forget. Stephanie Gosk, thank you so much for carrying us through this first part of our coverage. We will have much more of today's tributes on our streaming channel, NBC News Now, also online at NBCnews.com. Most of you right now will return to the Today Show. For others, your regularly scheduled program. I'm Savannah Guthrie. This has been an NBC News special report.
Admiral Abad. Marie Rose Abad.
Back here on Morning News Now, let's get out to NBC News correspondent Rahima Ellis, who is on the ground in New York, down there at the footprint of the Twin Towers. We just witnessed this poignant moment of silence marking 23 years since 9/11. Give us a sense of the emotion there that you're feeling at this ceremony.
I take a deep breath, much like people are taking a collective deep breath this morning. You're hearing the reading of the names. It's just beginning, following one of 6 moments of silence that will occur here today. Those moments of silence are to remember what happened when the first tower fell, the second tower fell, when there was the attack of the plane at the Pentagon, then when Flight 93 went into the field in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. All of those moments, which are realized right now, once again, 23 years later. And it's a moment that brings back grief. Every year that I've covered this for the last 23 years, you will see tears and you will hear people cry. And it's a cry that comes from a memory of what they lost. And for others, it's a cry for a longing of what they never had. Some children were born after their parents died in this tragedy. So again, that longing for what they never had. And this is a time where people aren't giving a lot of speeches, but they're reading those names, some 3,000 names of people, more than 2,980 some odd people who died here at the World Trade Center, and those who died at the Pentagon and Shanksville, as well as 6 other people, Savannah and Joe, who were killed the first time the World Trade Center was attacked back in 1993. So this is a very somber moment of remembrance and reflection for all of the people who come, the loved ones, the firefighters, the first responders, the police officers, the paramedics, and just everyday ordinary citizens, some who ran from the scene and others who ran to it, hoping that they might be able to help in some way on that day. They come back to share their memories and to grieve, a grief that for many is as raw today as it was 23 years ago. Joe and Savannah?
Rahima, I know over the last 23 years you've spoken with so many of the relatives and friends of those who lost their lives on 9/11. Talk about what this day means to them.
For every single person I've ever spoken to, all of them say how grateful they are that as a nation we take a moment and we pause. It's like with anyone who loses a loved one. You don't want that memory to die. And so this event is an opportunity for the world and for the United States in particular, and especially people here in New York City, to keep the memory of the people that they lost and loved alive. And so through the tears and through the grief, there are also many wonderful, happy memories that people have shared with me about their loved ones. And that reflection is something that they hold on to. And people have said they come back here year after year after year. And many have told me that they will be back here every single anniversary for as long as they live. Joe and Savannah?
Rahima, this day is absolutely not about politics, but we do know that both presidential candidates are at the event, as well as President Biden and Senator J.D. Vance. Tell us about how they're reflecting on this moment and how they'll spend the day.
Well, they will spend the day, in many instances, going to services and ceremonies also that will remember what happened. There will be ceremonies at the Pentagon. There will be a ceremony in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. But again, as I mentioned, as you mentioned, Savannah, it's not about political speeches today, and it's never been about that. But it is about the dignitaries from all over, from the firefighters to the commissioners to the mayors, all coming together and expressing a collective remembrance of what happened here, but not about making political speeches. Savannah?
Thank you very much. An important day to mark, something we will, of course, never forget. We appreciate your reporting this morning.
Please stay with us. Morning News Now continues in just a moment.
Antonio Javier Alvarez.
Victoria Apostle Jr.
Finally this hour, on this 23rd anniversary of the 9/11 attacks, a group of New York City firefighters is honoring their fallen colleagues far from home.
NBC's international correspondent Kelly Kobaya is in Middleton, Ireland with their story. Hi, Kelly. Good morning.
Hi, good morning to you both. Yes, about 100 firefighters, both from New York and some from here in Ireland, are nearing the end of what has been a grueling 3-day bike ride across this country. They're stopping at firehouses like these. In fact, they just left for the final stretch of their ride moments ago. They're raising money for their colleagues in New York. And at the end of their final climb today, later this afternoon, is a pretty special place, a 9/11 memorial, not made of steel or stone, but of trees. Amid these lush and green rolling hills in Ireland, New York City firefighters riding to remember 9/11's fallen heroes. With Irish firefighters alongside them, a team of almost 100 on a 3-day road trip, pedaling down Ireland's east coast, more than 220 miles in all, setting off in Dublin last Sunday.
It's just an incredible moment.
Battalion Chief Danny Sheridan is a third-generation Irish American. He was at Ground Zero shortly after the second tower fell.
As we're riding through, it's just a remembrance. I carry all those guys with me.
More than 300 first responders died trying to save lives at the Twin Towers September 11th. Many who survived are now struggling.
We lost 343 firefighters in an instant. We lost 370 firefighters since that day of firefighters who passed from 9/11-related illnesses. And it's a never-ending.
A firefighter's truck leading the pack. In Irish villages, a hero's welcome.
Oh, look at this.
Riding strong all the way to their finish line this morning. They're all on their way here to this little grove of trees on a hilltop in the Irish countryside, more than 3,000 miles from Ground Zero. Next to every tree, the name of a New York firefighter who died on 9/11. Dozens of Irish names, some with deep roots to this land, including Father Michael Judge, the fire department's chaplain who died on 9/11 helping others. His close friend, Irish nurse Kathleen Murphy, created this sacred place. She treated the injured at New York's Lenox Hill Hospital on 9/11, returning here to her homeland weeks later to plant 343 trees, one for each fallen hero. Kathleen passed away in 2011. Her nephew, John Murphy, now carrying on. It's very peaceful up here.
I'd say that's the number one word that people would say.
Something magical about it up here.
Yeah.
The FDNY badge turned into a shrine and a reminder of their ultimate sacrifice. Retired New York firefighter Danny Manning has been coming here for 23 years.
With the trees that continue to flourish, they continue to blossom, and they continue to grow. So for the many of the 9/11 families who come here often, which they do, it's a living memorial.
A home away from home. And on the open road, lots of laughs.
How do I get to the Brooklyn Bridge?
This will be the first time since 9/11 that I'm not at Ground Zero, but I can't think of a better place that I would rather be.
Inspiring young fans and forging friendships.
This is unreal. I mean, beyond my expectations, I just figured we'd do a simple ride. Didn't know they would bring out the whole town. It's really overwhelming.
Together, finding a new way to never forget. And the group will hold a remembrance ceremony at that Memorial Garden later this afternoon once they arrive. They still have, Joe and Savannah, about 20 miles to go. As I said, just took off a short time ago. A few hills to climb, but lots of people waiting in some of these villages to cheer them on.
What an impressive effort. Absolutely incredible. Kelly, thank you so much for sharing that story with us.
Amazing.
That's going to do it for this hour of Morning News Now.
Stay with us, though. The news continues right now.
And my grandfather, Carl W. Tepe. I hear many stories about.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.